all the commentaries ask, this talks about the law of the paraduma, the red heifer. So the Torah should say, Zos chukas hapara. Just like when it speaks about Korban Pesach, just like when it speaks about the Korban Pesach, the Torah says, Zos chukas hapesach, this is the laws of the Korban Pesach. So the same thing, it should say here, Zos chukas hapara. It's the laws of the paraduma. Why does it say, Zos chukas haTorah? Okay? Another thing, the beginning of the pasuk says, "V'yikchu elacha paraduma." Okay, take upon yourself the paraduma. Now, paraduma we know is the ultimate level, what's called a choik, a statute that's completely illogical. The Medrash says Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, said he understood the reason for all the illogical mitzvahs in the Torah. For instance, meat and milk together doesn't make sense. Meat is kosher, milk is kosher. Two positives, put them together, it makes a negative. That doesn't make sense. Wool, linen, separately, it's good. You put them together, it's no good. The whole concept of kashrus doesn't make sense. The laws of impurity don't make sense. Okay, it's chukim. So Moshe, the Medrash says, Shlomo Melech understood every single reason for every single mitzvah, even the illogical ones, except para aduma, the red heifer. And Shlomo Melech said, Amarti, it's a pasuk, but he says, Amarti hachakma, I thought I'm going to understand it, v'yirechoka mimeni, it's far from me, it's above me, I couldn't understand it. So the Medrash says, on the pasuk, v'yikchu elecha, take for yourself, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, L'cha ani megala tampara. Only to you will I tell you the reason. Nobody else will ever know the reason. The paraduma, Hashem says, Moshe, even Shlomo Melech, the wisest of all men, also didn't get it. Okay? Now, what is the illogic of the concept of paraduma? There's a lot of interesting craziness, so to speak, if you can use that word, in paraduma. Number one, the whole concept of purity and impurity is completely out of the box, like they say. It's not a normal thing. First of all, if you get your finger dirty, your whole body doesn't get dirty. Your finger gets dirty, you wash your finger. Okay? When it comes to impurity, a person touches a little finger, touches a dead body or a dead bug or whatever it was, that causes impurity, the whole body is impure. Why? Why should the whole body be impure? Because this little finger, the pinky, the end of the pinky touched something impure. Why should that affect it in that way? And the whole concept of a mikvah, okay, which is interesting. It becomes impure when a drop of the fingers touches something, it becomes impure. And to go to mikveh, your whole body has to be immersed. If one hair is sticking out of the water, you're not pure. I mean, all these things don't make sense. And the Rambam, at the end of the laws of impurity, the Rambam says, Lo am meis metame, v'lo am mikveh metaher. A dead body doesn't make you impure, and a mikveh doesn't make you pure. What God said, and a dead body makes you impure, and a mikveh makes you pure. In other words, there's no reason why somebody should become impure. That's what the Rambam's saying. It's not that the dead body makes you impure. Why should a dead body make you impure? The answer is, Hashem said, and that's the logic of it. Hashem said, a dead body makes you impure. A mikveh makes you pure. Another interesting thing, which is also illogical. So what happens if somebody became impure from a dead body? Okay, the Tumas mess, which the Medrash says, we'll soon see, elaborate on that more. The Medrash says, when Moshe Rabbeinu heard Adam Kiyom was ba'oil, if there's a dead body, Niskar Kamu, the Medrash says, Niskar Kamu Panav Shel Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu's face dropped, and he said, Zu bama tehei tahadasei. How are you going to purify such a level of impurity? Okay? But one of the, again, the uniquenesses and the lessons of Parshat Aduma is, guy came in touch with a dead body, became impure. Okay? So he has to come to the Kohen Gadol. He has to get, not the Kohen Gadol, the Kohen. He has to get squirted with the ashes of the Parshat Aduma on the 3rd day and the 7th day, and then he's pure. Okay? The dead body guy becomes pure. But the din was, the Kohen that squirted the ashes on the person, he became impure. He became impure. So this is like, I mean, I don't want to use the word, God forbid, crazy, but I'm saying crazy as far as illogical is concerned. I'm squirting the ashes on you to make you pure, and I become impure by that. That again is very difficult. There's a lot of it. It's an interesting lesson from this, by the way.
What?
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 Well, give me time. We're going to get there.
Okay.
It takes time. Okay, so now also, what's this whole concept of, like we said, Zeis Chukat and Torah? So, it should say Zeis Chukat and Torah. It should say these are the statutes, the illogical laws of the Parshat Aduma. So it means as follows. There are 3 types of mitzvahs. Eidus, or let's say Mishpatim, Eidus, and Chukim. Mishpatim represents the logical mitzvahs. What does it mean, the logical mitzvahs? The Gemara uses the expression that even if, God forbid, Torah wouldn't have been given, we would also learn it.
Kill, steal.
The Gemara says we would learn modesty from a cat, and this from another. We would learn, things. They're logical. Like, there's a lot of people don't steal, they don't kill, they don't lust, they don't. There's a lot of logical mitzvahs. Those are mishpatim. Mishpatim means mitzvahs that God gave us the reason for it, or we are on our own. We understand the reason for it. Eidus are called testimonial mitzvahs. Why? What type of mitzvahs are those? So Chazal tells, Chassidus elaborates on it, that Eidus represents mitzvahs on our own. I wouldn't come up with them. It's not logical that I would come up with it even if the Torah wasn't given. It means on my own I wouldn't come up with it. But after Hashem said it, it makes sense. For instance, Shabbos. On our own, we wouldn't come up with a concept of Shabbos. But after Hashem says, listen, I created the world in 6 days, I rested on the 7th, I want you to rest on Shabbos. Okay? There's a mitzvah called Pesach. It says, Mitzayim, Matzah, Morok, Paschal Lamb, all that stuff. On our own, we wouldn't necessarily come up with it. But after Hashem says, listen, I took you out of Egypt, I want you to eat matzah, it makes sense. There's a logic. It's logical, but on our own, we wouldn't do it. Chukim, statutes, like we just discussed, are completely illogical. Even after the Torah says to keep it, it still doesn't make sense. In fact, Rashi says the expression that the nations of the world laugh. Why are we keeping these mitzvahs?
Tachelet would be considered a chuk?
Tzitzis is a chayk. Yeah. Even though maybe say, no, it's a chayk. It's a chayk.
What about, for example, freeing the mother bird? That makes a little sense.
That makes a little sense because it's tzar b'alei chayim, it's torture, which is biblically forbidden to torture animals.
So that makes sense once you explain.
Yeah, but Eidus, generally speaking, the testimonial mitzvahs, they'll tell you Shabbos, Pesach, Sukkot. God took us out of Egypt, put us into huts, so we sit in the sukkah. It makes sense. So, when the Jews have three mitzvahs, now, why did God give us these 3 types of mitzvahs? Logical, semi-logical, and illogical. Because Hashem says, I gave you mitzvahs. Okay? You have a head. I want you to use your head. It's the highest faculty of the human. So I want you to understand those things that I allow you to understand. I allowed you to understand. Why? I want you to use your head to figure out the logic of Torah, logic of Talmud, Gemara, whatever it is. I want you to use your head to figure out the logic of Torah and mitzvahs. Chukim, Hashem says, listen, I don't have to tell you the reason. This is, I created you, I took you out of Egypt, your existence every second is dependent on me. This is what I want you to do. That's it. You have to do it. Finish. No if, buts. You have to do it. Eidus is like in between. Hashem says, it's logical but illogical. Okay? But Torah comes along and says, Zeis chukas ha-Torah. Which means, Hashem says to the Jewish people, I want you to keep every single mitzvah like it's a chok, like it's illogical. Totally subservient.
It's an issue of bittul.
Yeah, but I'll tell you why. It's not, there's a fundamental difference over here. A mitzvah that I keep because I understand it. Okay? I'll give you a simple example. We've mentioned this many, many times. Torah says in 10 Commandments, the top 10, honor your father and mother. Logical. They brought you into the world, they support you, they raised you. Honor your father and mother. It's logical mitzvah. But what happens though if logic dictates I shouldn't honor them? Here's a very simple example. They gave birth to me. They gave me up for adoption right away. Okay, I wasn't raised by them. Or, God forbid, they were abusive, or whatever it may be. So logic would dictate that, okay, then you don't have to honor them, because they're not what Dr. Laurie used to, they're your sperm parents, whatever. But they're not your parents. Comes along Torah and says, no, that's not true. I'm telling you, Kabbalistic and Chassidic, you have to understand it. It's a mishpat, mishpatim, you have to understand it. But I'm telling you right now, the Torah is kept not because you understand. I don't want you to honor your father and mother because if the because is not it doesn't apply, it's not applicable, then I'm not going to do it. Comes along Torah and says, no, you honor your father and mother because God said so. That means your biological parents is the biblical commandment to respect, honor. If you were adopted, let's say, God, whatever the situation is, you have to honor them also, but it's not the mitzvah of honoring your father and mother. That's already menschlichkeit, decency. They raised you, they adopted you, you have to honor them. But the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em is not a logical mitzvah. Hashem says, it's logical, I want you to understand it. At the same time, I want you to understand and really realize that that's not why you're honoring your father and mother. You're honoring your father and mother because it's chukas ha-Torah, because God said so. 1 second. Not to steal, don't steal is very logic. Right? We mentioned this many, many times. There was a guy in folklore, probably didn't exist, but in folklore there's a guy called Robin Hood. Yeah? Robin Hood stole from the rich and gave to the poor. So in folklore, he was a holy, great, tzaddik, Robin Hood. And according to Torah, he was a thief. He was not allowed to do what he did. You're not allowed to steal from the rich to give to the poor. Just because this rich stole from the poor doesn't mean you can steal from the rich and give it back to the poor. Okay? So, if you're keeping Torah mitzvahs, even the logical mitzvahs, I'm saying, if you're keeping them because it's logical, the problem is, then when the reason doesn't apply, you're not going to keep them. But that's not what Torah says. Torah says, honor your father and mother, period. Don't steal, period. It doesn't say why. If the Torah say, honor your father and mother because they raised you. Okay, so if the reason doesn't apply, you don't have to honor them. But Torah doesn't say that. And even things that we do understand. For instance, you learn Torah. Okay, you understand. We think we understand. Okay, and we do understand. Halachically, we understand. Okay, you get a mitzvah of learning Torah, knowing Torah, because we understand. But if you think about it, Torah is God's infinite wisdom, that there's no way in the world we can understand it. And yet, Hashem allows us to understand it. But when we understand it, we have to understand, though, that that's not the real depth of Torah. Because the real depth of Torah is infinite. It's Hashem's wisdom. And Hashem's wisdom is infinite. So the Torah says, Zeis Chukas Torah, because the Torah is teaching us by Parah Aduma, because that's the most illogical mitzvah. Like we said before, the impure become pure, the pure become impure. The whole thing does, laws of purity, impurity doesn't make sense. But nevertheless, the Torah is teaching us by this thing, Zeis Chukas Torah, that everything in Torah is to be kept because, Hashem said so. And that's it. Now another interesting thing of this whole thing, the lessons because we have to learn lessons from every aspect. But today we don't have a paraduma. The Rambam says there were 9 paradumas throughout history, and the 10th one, the Rambam says Mashiach is going to bring, and he says, "B'mheira yavei amen ken yiratzen." The Rambam, when he quotes the 10th cow, Mashiach is going to bring the 10th paraduma. He should come speedily, amen ken yiratzen. Rambam mentioned Mashiach, he davens that Mashiach should come. So the 10th paraduma Mashiach is going to make. But we don't have a paraduma today, but we have to take the lessons of the paraduma. One of the things we mentioned before, that if you put your little finger touching a dead body, your whole body becomes impure. Okay? Somebody can ask, my little finger, what does it have to do with the whole body? Why should the whole body become pure? Again, I get a little dirt on my finger, the whole body doesn't become dirty. Why should the spiritual dirt work like that? So the lesson is, if it's like that in negativity, how much more so a little mitzvah that you do with one part of your body affects your whole body, because we're a microcosm, we're a mini world. So therefore, any action I do, a little action, we shouldn't say it's a little action. It doesn't mean anything. Because that little, just like impurity, negativity, a drop of touching impurity makes the whole body impure. Touching something holy makes the whole body pure, holy and pure, and so on and so forth. And another interesting thing, Parah Aduma was a carbon. It's actually, they shechted the Parah Aduma, it was brought as a carbon, then the ashes they took and mixed it with special water and stuff. But there was a uniqueness about Parah Aduma that was different than all the other sacrifices. All the sacrifices that were brought had to be slaughtered in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple. Parah Aduma was shechted michutz lamachana, outside the camp. It was the only carbon not shechted in the base. In fact, they made a whole ramp going from the Beis HaMikdash to the east, and they shechted the carbon outside of the camp, and then they brought it back, the whole thing in the process of the Parah Aduma. Why was Parah Aduma?
Where was it burned?
Outside. It was a designated place outside east of Yerushalayim.
So even so not just the slaughtering.
The east of Yerushalayim, Rashi says, they stood in the east of Yerushalayim, but they saw the opening of the Heichal when they squirted the blood. What?
The whole process was done outside the Machane, the camp.
Part of it was, yeah. Okay, but an interesting point over here is, why was this korban out of all korbanos made outside? Yeah. So the answer is, because to purify another Jew, don't wait until the Jew comes to you. You have to go outside to them, so to speak. And that's why one of the illogical things of Parah Aduma was the guy that squirted the ashes made the other person pure and he became impure. Right? So what's the lesson? And I'm going to go into the next point over here. what the Torah is teaching us, and I'll elaborate on it in a second. If there's a Jew that's impure, okay, spiritually, okay, not knowing about Yiddishkeit yet, whatever it may be, he's not there yet. A guy will say, I should go out to a city where there's no kosher food, there's no mikvah, there's no school for my kids. I should go out. I'm gonna become impure myself. The Torah says, in order to purify another Jew from the impurity of a dead body, and I'll explain how bad that impurity is, you have to be willing to impurify yourself to make another Jew pure. Meaning, you have to give of your own learning. You could be maybe learning brilliant things in Torah, and you're going to go teach Aleph Beis to little kids or to older people that don't know Aleph Beis. You're going to go teach them Aleph Beis. Aren't you impurifying yourself by doing that? You're not, in an environment which is holy, and everybody is part of that environment, right? So why should I do it? The Torah comes along and says, you have to in order to purify another Jew, sometimes you have to become impure yourself. And where do you have to go out to? Michutz lamachne. You have to go outside the camp to slaughter this paradum and to do the process in order to... Don't wait. Many people are of the opinion, even today, this is what Chabad broke through the barrier of this. Many people say, I'm not going to go out into the street and put tefillin on with people, or give a woman in the street, hi, do you light Shabbos candles? Here's candles, light Shabbos candles. That's not normal Judaism, by the way. Normal Judaism years ago was, a guy walked into shul, he came to daven, okay, do you want to put on tefillin? A guest came to your house, would you like to light Shabbos candles? If they came to you, but to go out and stop a guy in the street, excuse me, are you Jewish? It's not normal, by the way. If you think about it, it's not normal. Excuse me, are you Jewish? Like, what's your business? Okay, you want to put on tefillin. So the Rebbe said years ago that wasn't necessary. And we live in a world today that they're not going to come to you. You have to go michutz lamachane. You have to go out of the camp to get the paraduma ready, to purify another Jew. And even if it means, in a certain spiritual sense, I'm going to be impurifying myself compared to what I could be learning and doing, and you have to do it. That's what it's all about.
One time you said the world is crazy, no problem. You have to be crazy too.
Yes, because if the world's crazy all the way to the left, you have to make them crazy all the way to the right, and then they become normal.
So that's why we go off to somebody and do something that's
crazy. Yeah. Why Hashem made it easier? The whole world today is so crazy. So when you do something crazy, people don't notice. Really, people don't know because everybody else is crazy anyway. But this is good craziness versus evil craziness. Okay, now the concept of why we just said before, the Medrash says Moshe Rabbeinu heard about the impurity of a paraduma. He said, how is this, of a dead body, how is it going to become pure? Well, what's so terrible? Death means a complete lack of life. Complete lack of life, okay? A dead body is cold. You can have a spiritual death. You can be physically very strong, but you can be spiritually dead. Now, spiritually dead means you're cold. Dead body is cold. You are cold to Yiddishkeit. You're cold to Judaism. You're cold to spirituality. You're like a dead body. Now, that is the worst thing, because when we take out the Torah, we say, it's a pasuk in the Dvarim. V'atem adveikem Hashem Elokechem, chayim kol chamayim. You are clinging to Hashem, you're all alive today. Okay? Hashem is life. Hashem is the real life. Why? Our sages tell us the definition of truth is eternity. That's the definition of truth. We learned this, the Gemara says, in the Beis HaMikdash they needed what was called mayim chayim, living water. It means flowing water, natural well water. And they needed it for the Beis, in fact they needed it for the Paraduma, mayim chayim, Elkeli. They needed this mayim chayim. The Gemara says a well, a mayim that dried up once in 7 years, that means 6 years it flowed. Once in 7 years it dried up, it wasn't kosher to use all 6 years. Why not? Now it's flowing. Now it's mayim chayim, it's flowing. The fact that it's eventually going to stop, why do I care? Because the Talmud, the Gemara says, because truth is eternity. If something is sometimes yes and sometimes not, even when it is, it's not real. Because if it's real, it would be eternal. And the fact that it's not eternal shows it's not real even during the time it's existing. And therefore the Gemara says, the fact that in the seventh year is going to dry up, that means even during the other years, it's not really natural water.
So nothing on this planet is...
Correct. There is. I'll tell you what it is in a second. Now, a person is born, they live 120 years, and they pass away. Okay? The fact that there was a time they didn't exist, there is a time they won't exist, based on this concept, means that even while they're existing, it's not a real existence. There's a famous Rabbeinu Bachya, whichever way you pronounce his name, at the beginning of Chumash, the beginning of Bereshit, Rabbeinu Bachya says, Hatinig miyad shenelad maschel is yabish. A baby, as soon as it's, I'm paraphrasing, a baby, as soon as it's born, begins to die. It literally means to dry up. Why? The second you're born, you have 120 years to live. You're an hour old, you only have 119 years, 364, 23 hours. You know what I mean? So you're already beginning. So the point is, something which is not a real existence, even when it's existing, is not a real existence. Therefore it says in Chumash, Va'atem adveikem Hashem Elokechem. When the Jew is clinging to Hashem, Chayim kol chamayim. You are alive. Because Hashem always was, is, and will be. So the only real life existing is Hashem himself, nothing else. Is there actual existence. What, you want to ask something? Oh.
No, I was just going to say that the only thing that is real in this whole world is God.
Right. But not only God, I'll tell you some little secret. Torah is real and mitzvahs are real because they're an extension of God. Hashem and his Torah is one, Hashem and his mitzvahs are one. So therefore, Torah is real, mitzvahs are real.
Wait.
So now, one second. So therefore, what?
Sorry, I was going to ask a question.
What?
Based on this, what if I apply Hashem in all my physical activities?
Then the physical activities are alive. But the problem with paraduma is death. Death is cold. Death is a lack of life. So if somebody, therefore, is cold to Judaism, in other words, they're just apathetic, cold, not interested, that makes them spiritually dead. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes along to Hashem and says, a Jew who is that spiritually dead? What? How can we revive him? How can we purify that guy? So that's the concept of chayk para aduma. When we do mitzvahs, because Hashem said so, then we are really connecting not to the level of godliness, which could be understood, but to the essence of God, which is above logic, above time and place, and therefore we become alive. And that's why, at the beginning we mentioned, Shlomo Melech didn't understand the reason for Paraduma. Right? Why? Shlomo Melech was the epitome of intellect. Intellect can't understand how do you resurrect the dead. In other words, to use Chassidic language, intellect is cold. Emotions are warm. When a Chassid or a Jew takes their emotions and they warm up their intellect, it means they do mitzvahs with life and vigor and vitality and excitement. That's called Tchias HaMesim. That's called resurrection of the dead. Because that is the revival. That's what Paraduma is. Zeis Chukat Satera. And there's another point of Chukah. And this is where it comes in here. The word Chukah, like we said, is Choik, means illogical. There's a famous mimer that Alter Rebbe says that all over Chassidus brings it down. Choik, besides meaning an illogical mitzvah, comes in the word Chakika. Chakika means engraved. Engraved within you. The Alter Rebbe says, Zeis Chukas HaTorah means Torah has to be ingrained. Engraved, literally means engraved within us. What does that mean? You can have a letter, the long story with the Friedrich I've been told many times. I don't want to tell it now, we don't want to cover other stuff. But there's written letters, ink and parchment. Ink and parchment are two separate entities. I could take an eraser and erase the ink from the parchment. Engraved letter is part and parcel of the stone. It can never become erased. The only thing that could happen to it is it could become full of dust, and all you got to do is take a little brush and dust it off. Sometimes, like I said many times, it could be so covered with mud you'll need the bulldozer to clean it. But the letter never fades away. A letter never fades away. And the previous Rebbe told somebody that the Judaism of a Jew is not a written letter that's you can rub off and erase. The letter, the Yiddishkeit of a Jew is engraved and part and parcel of the Jew. That's their existence. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu was a level of humility, not of intellect. Moshe Rabbeinu is the epitome of intellect. But Moshe Rabbeinu was higher than intellect. Okay, he came from the hidden worlds of Elokus, Alma Diskasia, the infinite levels of godliness. So Hashem says to Shlomo Melech, you're not going to get it. Because this is completely irrational. All the other illogical mitzvahs of the Torah, there is some logic to them. Okay? I'll give you a simple example. We mentioned before wool and linen. Okay? Kabbalistically, there's a lot of reasons why wool and linen are no good. But even though, again, Hashem said it's illogical, that's it. But after we know it's illogical, let's use our brain. So it says, why did Hashem forbid wool and linen? Because Cain and Hevel, Cain brought wool from the animals, and Hevel brought wool from the animals, and Cain brought flax, which is linen. And because one brought wool and one brought linen, and the guy killed his brother because of it, Hashem said, I don't want wool and linen together. It's too dangerous having Cain and Hevel together in one garment, they're going to kill each other. I mean, so there's a logic behind it. Tumas Mes, there is no logic at all. And Moshe Rabbeinu, when he heard the laws of impurity, his face, there's a word like it, simply in English it means his face fell, that he was like turned white. How are you going to purify such a thing? The answer is you purify them through the paraduma, zeis chukas HaTorah. When the Yiddishkeit of a person becomes engraved within him, it's one with him, then it becomes truth. And that's an interesting thing. The word in Hebrew, mace, dead, is Mem Saf. Okay? What's Emes? Aleph Mem Saf. Aleph represents God. When you stick Aleph, when you put God into a mace, to a dead body, as you spiritually resurrect the dead, then you have Emes, then you have truth, which is eternal. So these are all the lessons of the Parah Adumah. But the Gemara says, there's also a pasuk over here. Here, in Parak Yutas pasuk Yedalit. The pasuk says, Zeis HaTorah, simply means these are the laws, Adam ki yamas ba'oil. If a man will die in the tent, because the laws of impurity, by the way, is not only if you touch a dead body. If, God forbid, there's a dead body in this room, under the same roof, everybody in this room would become impure. If it's a Jewish body, God forbid, in the whole building, everybody in the building would become impure. It's called Ohel, the same tent. So the Torah over there says, Adam ki yamas ba'ohel, if a man will die in the tent, these are the laws. But the Gemara says, on that pasuk, Zeis HaTorah, it says like this, if you want to, the Gemara is learning it in a deeper sense. Zeis HaTorah, this is the Torah, meaning, if you want to acquire Torah, Adam ki yamas, you have to die for it. In other words, what does it mean die? Hashem doesn't want us to die. It means if you want to acquire Torah, you have to divorce yourself from worldly pleasures, worldly temptations, worldly things. Because again, godliness and world and temptations and lusts and pleasures are opposite. You want to be connected to God, you can't have the same thing with worldly pleasures. By the way, in yesteryear, all the great scientists that invented brilliant things that saved the world, so to speak, they lived a life of depravity. They weren't wealthy people. They could have been. That wasn't their life. They weren't into pleasures and that. They were into the figuring out what to do. So the Torah says, Adam ki yamas ba'ohel. If you want to acquire Torah, okay, you have to be a vessel for godliness. As the expression, in the world, people say, they hear about this great food, they'll say, I'll die for it. Torah says, don't die for the food. Die for observance of Torah mitzvahs, meaning warm up, don't die in it, but warm up in the enthusiasm and become alive. And that's what it's all about, so to speak. Okay, that's that aspect of it. Later on in the Chumash, again in this week's Parshat, never fails the Jews complained. It's not okay. Correct. Yeah. What, kvetching? According to some Jews, it's a biblical mitzvah. Okay. In chapter 21, Chaval, Pasuk Dalet, okay, the Jews left Har, okay, they left, and Vatiksa Nefesh Adam B'derech, okay, the Jews started really complaining, okay, they started complaining in sentence 5, they complained against God and Moshe, and they said, why did you take us, why? Because the Jews were about to go into Eretz Yisrael, and Hashem made them go backwards. So they said, oh my God, what's going on over here? We're supposed to go, and they started complaining against Hashem and Moshe, and they said, why did you take us out of, we have no water, we have no food, we're sick and tired with this man. Okay, we're sick and tired with the man. So what happens? Hashem sent snakes and seraphim that burned the person, okay? And they bit the Jews. The snakes came and bit the Jews, and a lot of Jews died. Okay? So, of course, Jews are you special. They'll complain. Also, Hashem will punish them. They'll say, okay, we're sorry. That's it. Yeah. So he said, okay, we sinned. Get rid of it. Get rid of this snake biting. So Hashem says to Moshe like this, Asay lecha saraf, make a saraf, which is a type of a snake, The Simaisi al Nes, put it on a banner, and whoever gets bitten will look at that banner, v'chai, and they'll live. By the way, you know the logo of doctors is this snake on, that's from this, by the way. Okay. So it says, Moshe Rabbeinu made it out of copper, nechash necheshes, and it says he put it on a banner high up that everybody can see it. When whoever got bitten by the snake, he looked at it and he got alive. And he was healthy again. Now, what's this nachash over here going on? Okay? Nachash, snake, represents original sin. Huh? Chatei tzadas. What? No, before that, Adam and Chava, the snake got Adam and Chava to sin.
He was the first one who did Lashon Hara, no?
Well, he Lashon Hara a little bit. But the Nachash was original sin. Caused the Chava to sin, and she got Adam to sin, and so on. The Nachash wasn't only a sin that, the guy sinned, he ate from the tree, he shouldn't have. The Chetei Tadas, Kabbalah and Chassidus explain, before they sinned, before Adam and Chava sinned, eating from the tree, there was a distinct separation in the world between good and bad. Good was defined as good, bad was defined as bad. When Adam and Chava sinned through the Nachash, it actually, Kabbalah says, it mixed in good and bad to such an extent, there's no good without bad, and there's no bad without good. They literally homogenized good and bad. By Matan Torah, it returned to what it was pre-Eitz Hadas, but then the ego, the golden calf, made it again. Okay? Now, so all evil in the world basically comes from the concept of the Nachash. But the role of a Jew is to transform evil into holiness. That's our whole function. Take world and make world holy. The breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wore, one of the 8 garments of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, was the Cheshen. Cheshen is the same letters as the word Nachash. Ches, Shin, Nun, Nun, Ches, Shin. So it says in Kabbalah that the Nachash, the sin of the Nachash, was forgiven by the Choshen that the Kohen Gadol wore. He transformed the Nachash, this terrible sin, into a Choshen, into a breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Moshe Rabbeinu here did the same thing. He made this copper snake that when people who were bitten and were going to die, looking at that snake made them live again. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu, in essence, took the Nachash that was the cause of original sin that brought death into the world and all the other stuff, junk we have in the world because of it, and he transformed it that heals everybody. And the Gemara asks, in fact, Rashi brings it down over here. The Gemara asks, does the snake kill, and does the snake that bit them kill the Nachash Meimis and Machaya? So it says no. What it means is, when the Jews looked up to God, they looked on the banner, to God, God heals. You don't look down, you don't look up, you look down at worldly things, and that's what you get involved in, then it's going to kill you. But Moshe Rabbeinu over here did the Nachash. He took the Nachash and he made it into something that gives life instead of something that destroys life. Okay, another interesting story that happened later on in Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Okay, they were traveling, and then it says they came to Arnon, Asher Bamidbar, which was in the desert. Okay, and Ki Arnon Gvul Moav, and then they started singing praise. Okay, in Pasuk Yud Zayin of Parak Chaf Aleph, their water came out of the well. Okay, And then they started singing, Az Yashim Meisha Sashira Zeis. The Jews started singing this praise of Hashem. What was the miracle that happened? It was a very interesting miracle. The Jews were traveling through the desert, and there were two mountains next to each other. The nations of Ameri, other nations, put all their soldiers on top of them, both mountains, that when the Jews would walk through the mountain, they would kill out all the Jews. That was their plan. The Jews didn't even know it. Hashem made a miracle. He crushed the two mountains together. The Jews were saved. And all they saw, how did they know the miracle happened? They saw blood flowing. So the Jews, after that miracle, they sang praise to Hashem. Okay?
What's the name of this song?
No, it's
Does it have like a name?
no. It says also.
Az Yashir is the name.
No, this is Be'er. It says Be'er Chafudar Sarim. The Jews in history, everything 9 and 10, the Jews, it says Az Yashir, the Balaturm says Yud Shir. Throughout Tanakh, throughout 24 books of Tanakh, of scriptures, the Jews sang praise 9 times to God. Once in Parshat B'Shalach, once here, once by Devorah, after we read it. 9 times the Jews said, okay, praise Hashem. The 10th one, Mashiach is going to sing with the Jews. Now, why only by Kriyas Yamsuf and by this other one, this one here, did the Jews sing praise to Hashem, and not by Amalek? We don't find that. You won the war of Amalek, they sing praise to Hashem. You know, we don't find it. We find it by Mitzrayim and by here, by our name. So the Rebbe explains, it's very interesting, very beautiful. Those were the only 2 battles they didn't fight. Amalek, the Jews fought. When the Jews left Egypt, the Jews didn't know what to do. What does the pasuk say? Hashem Yilachim lachem. God will fight for you, and you be quiet, just move. So who killed the Egyptians? Hashem did. The Jews didn't fight. Okay? That means it wasn't a regular miracle. You have a battle, you're weak, and you're like Hanukkah, right? You're weaker and you win the battle. But there's a natural happening. Okay? Here, Mitzrayim was destroyed by Hashem. Hashem fought the battle without the Jews even knowing about it. This miracle we just explained, our name, the Jews didn't even know it was a miracle. Because they were hiding in the mountain, in the 2 mountains next to each other, twin mountains. Hashem crushed the mountains together. They all died. And the only way the Jews knew that they had a miracle was because they saw blood coming down from the mountain. So they looked up and they saw what happened. But the Jews didn't fight it. So the Rebbe explains, a miracle that's completely, in certain respects, this was a miracle that had no logic to it whatsoever. Because that's why they sing praise. Because it's a miracle that had no basis in nature to be able to say, okay, my strength did the war, like people want to say even today. It's my strength and my thing that did it. So it's completely above nature, and because it's completely above nature, that's why they sing praise. Kriyas Yamsuf and here.
But it's also like a hook because it's illogical. It's like God asks us to do things without logic, and also He does things for us that are beyond logic.
Correct. Because He wants us to do illogic. When we do illogical things, again, one of the fundamentals in Chassidus,
That's a miracle.
one of the fundamentals in Judaism is Hashem reacts to the way we act. It's a fundamental Chassidic concept. Hashem, Dal Malamayla Mimart Mezritcha Maga said, you should know whatever goes on up there is from you. Hashem Mida Keneged Mida, it's called, the Gemara says, deed for deed. Bottom line is, Hashem reacts to us the way we act. Therefore, you have all over Chumash. If you follow mitzvahs, you're going to get rain. You follow mitzvahs, you're going to have peace. You don't, you're not going to get. Okay? That means it's dependent on our behavior. Hashem reacts the way we act. Okay? If a person is doing mitzvahs illogically, again, even the logical mitzvahs, we don't do logical, we do it because Hashem said so. When a Jew does an illogical mitzvah, Hashem reacts to us in an illogical way, which means you don't deserve it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. In other words, if I deserve something and I get it, it's logical. You know, hopefully you have a job. You do your job properly. At the end of the week, you get a check. It's tzedakah. You worked, you deserve it, you get it. What is tzedakah? When you don't deserve it, and I give it to you. Right? You didn't do anything for me. You asked me for money, I'm giving it to you. When a Jew serves Hashem illogically, all mitzvahs illogically, Hashem reacts to us in an illogical way, meaning Hashem will give us more than we deserve. Hashem will do things in the world that are completely illogical for our benefit.
Rabbi,
What?
does it, if I go above my nature, is that classified as me being illogical?
Yeah, nature is, our logic is our nature. If we do something illogical, it's not normal for a human being to do things which are illogical. But there's different levels of illogical. Like we said before, by chayk, there's a chayk that Shlomo HaMelech understood the reason, and there's paraduma that even Shlomo HaMelech didn't understand the reason. Right? So, when we go above our nature, you know, a person could go above their nature, okay, a minute more, you know, but it's not, it's above nature, but still it's not...
So why, this is off topic, so why in this parsha are we ending with trying to go into Israel and the people don't let us in? What does that have to do with the rest of the stuff that we're talking about? And then
You mean at the end with Sichen and Oig, that they sent messages? No, we want to go through the land.
Yeah, but they all kept saying no or bother.
And therefore what happened?
I don't know what that has to do with the chuk.
It is. And then what happened?
You can't marry into them, right?
They hired, the 7 nations of Canaan hired Sichen and Og, were 2 most powerful superpowers of the world at that time.
Giants or something.
To stop, besides the fact they were giants, to stop the Jews in their tracks before they go into Israel. Okay? And Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, they say no, fine, that's it. They had their chance to make peace. They're not making peace, go get them. By Sichen was easier. Oig, Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of Oig. Not because physically, because Oig was the king that told Avram that Lot was captured, and you know that whole thing. So he says, this King Og has merits, so I don't want to, I'm afraid to start. Hashem said, don't be afraid of him. Nothing's going to happen. So what does Hashem want from us? Hashem wants us to act illogical. Now, I'm illogical within Torah mitzvahs. That means Hashem wants us to do things not because I understand it. Hashem wants me to do things because Hashem told me to do it. And therefore, it's an absolute. There's no logic that gets in the way. When I serve Hashem logically, my logic will say, oh, but not now. Can you imagine? I'll give you an example. Chassidus says, Hashem will come to the head of a person, intellect. Okay, Jew, put your head into boiling hot water. It's like when rabbis speak in shul, you know, about doing things. Everybody says he means somebody else. Maybe not today, next year, not tomorrow, somebody else. Hashem will tell the head, put yourself into hot water. The head represents intellect, right? So conceptually, the head thinks, does he mean me? Maybe I should cool off the water first. You know, intellect gets in the way of everything. When Hashem tells the foot, which is basically, brainless, there's no intellect in the foot. Hashem says to the foot, put yourself into boiling hot water. The foot's going to do it. Okay? Foot has Kabbalah's oil, acceptance of the yoke. There's no intellect. Intellect gets in the way. Because based on my intellect, that's how much I'm going to do it. And I'm going to finish with this, because later. The Shlomo Melech says a pasuk, Pesi yamin l'chol davar. A fool believes everything. In other words, he's gullible, he's naive. The Medrash says on that pasuk, who is Shlomo Melech referring to? Pesi yamin l'chol davar ze Moshe Rabbeinu. When Shlomo Melech says the fool who believes everything, he's referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the epitome in levels Chochma v'Atzilus. Avram, Yitzchok, and Yaakov were the Midas. Avram was Chesed, Yitzchok Gvura. Moshe Rabbeinu was the intellect of the highest godly levels. What do you mean he's a fool that believes everything? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, being that intellect that he was, served Hashem without intellect, like a fool that believes everything. He didn't allow his intellect to get in the way of observance, because when we do, intellect tells us, not today, maybe tomorrow, this, not so much, don't be so fanatic, chill, keep it cool. Okay, that's it for today. Everybody have a good... Wednesday night again will be Halach and Tanya. Till then we should only hear good news. Everybody should have only great things and all good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It says serpents, and then right afterwards, the 2 lines later, it says that there's serpent. First it says the serpents, then serpent.
There was one, he made one, but there are many serpents that were doing it.
First it said serpents, then serpent, right? Why did it go from plural to...
Because he made one out of it.
Out of all, they go back to one?
Yeah.
And that's the illegal.